Hello everybody, we are starting a new chapter today. Okay, it's going to be our last chapter for the semester. Whoop whoop. Okay, this chapter discusses quadratic equations and solving those quadratic equations. This chapter will bridge between your next algebra class. You'll kind of take a pause next year and look at geometry, and then you will pick up this information when you reach algebra 2. An element of this chapter would be graphing. However, we're going to save that for Algebra 2. You've had a little bit of experience with quadratic equations when we first started with exponents back in, was that March? Maybe end of February, when we were looking at, okay, how do I classify certain types of equations? And one of those equations was quadratic equations. So we talked about it a bit there. Then we moved on to factoring. And then we took a step back and looked at radicals. And now we're coming back to quadratic equations because despite factoring, we are going to start solving those. We're going to actually solve the equations and solve for x within the quadratic equations. And there's multiple ways that you can solve quadratic equations, kind of like there was multiple ways for us to factor. And it's depending on what type of equation you have. So our notes videos coming up are going to be looking at those different methods. So today we're going to be starting on our first method. But first let's take an overview scope of quadratic equations. A little bit of throwback. Your quadratic equations, the most basic form is going to be, or also noted as standard form, is going to be ax squared plus bx plus c. And we have attached that it's set equal to 0. A little caveat is that your a value, your coefficient, cannot be 0. Most of the time, our a value is 1, and we're given problems as x squared plus bx plus c. We saw this a lot when we were factoring, and we're going to be seeing more of that today. The 4 methods to solving for x are factoring, square root property, completing the square, and quadratic formula. So today we're going to be starting on that first process, which will be factoring. All right, our steps for solving, let's do blue, okay? Our steps for solving quadratic equations by factoring are going to be the first thing you want to do, despite it saying, okay, our equation's equal to y, you want to set your equation equal to 0. So in this example, I would have x squared plus 3x minus 10 equal to 0. You're always going to set it equal to 0. Then you are going to factor all of your stuff that's on the left side. One thing I want to note is for you to set it equal to 0, it needs to be in standard form. So if it's not in standard form, you got to rearrange. So all of your junk is on the left side, and you set it equal to 0. Okay. So now that I have that standard form, I'm going to factor. All right, remember I break it up into my 2 parentheses. I have x and x. I want to figure out what added together equals my middle and what multiplied equals my c, my last my last term. All right, let's think about my multiples of 10. So 1 and 10, 2 and 5. Can 2 and 5, to me, it's sticking out to me is that 2 and 5 can be added together to equal 3 if one of those is negative. Okay, so my 3 is positive, so I factor that to be x plus 5 and x minus 2. Okay, because 5 times 2 actually gives me negative 10, and my 5 minus 2 equals 3. I'm going to erase that so I have some room. All right, so now I'm factored. Now that I have factored that, I'm going to break up my parentheses into 2 separate equations and have both of those be set to 0. So I would write that as, I'm going to drop down here, x plus 5 is equal to 0, and x minus 2 is equal to 0. Now that I've broken up, I'm going to solve. All right, so minus 5, I have x equals minus 5, and I have, let's see, plus 2, I have x equals 2. All right, now that I have that broken up, that's my final answer. So, but there's a special notation for you to write your factors for solving quadratic equations. Now that we've solved for x, you use what we call curly brackets. And my answer is -5, comma 2. And that's my final answer. All right, so that's how you solve for quadratic equations. All right. Sorry, I had to shut my door because my sister's being loud downstairs. Let's have some more practice. Example number 2. I'm wanting to solve for the following quadratic equations by factoring. My problem is x squared plus 4x plus 3. First task, is it in standard form? Yes, it is. So I'm going to set her equal to 0. Now I'm going to break it up, factor it out. Remember, what's the one thing you always do first before you factor? Do I have a greatest common factor? Well, no, I don't here, okay? So now I break it up. All right, I need to figure out what adds together equal 4 and what multiplied together equals 3. Well, 3 plus 1 equals 4. So I'm going to say x plus 3, x plus 1 equals 0. Because 3 times 1 is 3, and 3 plus 1 is 4. Now that I have that broken up, I'm going to separate out my parentheses. X plus 3 equals 0, x plus 1 equals 0, and solve for x. So x is equal to -3, x is equal to -1. I cannot leave it like this. I have to write it in my curly brackets. So my answer is -3, comma, -1. There we have it. Let's do another example. I have x squared minus 10x plus 21. All right, I'm in standard form and it's set to 0 already, so I am ready to go. All right, so my first step is to factor. So I'm gonna have x and I'm gonna have x. I gotta figure out what my multiples of 21 are. So 1 and 21, 3 and 7. All right, can any of those be added together to equal -10? Yes, I can take 3 minus 7. Oh, wait, no, I can't. Woo, back up, back up, back up. It can't be 3 minus 7 because that's going to be -4. Oh, okay. I can take -3 plus -7 to equal -10. And -3 times -7 gives me +21. Okay? We love factoring, don't we? So -3 minus 7. Now that I have that factored out, I'm going to break her up and set each of those parentheses equal to 0. I'm going to solve for x, so +3, x is equal to +3, and x is equal to +7. So my final answer is 3, 7. All right, let's look at another example. Solve the following quadratic equations by factoring. My problem is x squared minus 45 equals 4x. Can I set that equal to 0? No, I cannot because it's not in standard form. So a little trick that we use to go along with this is move, factor, solve. So I'm going to subtract this 4x over, so it is set equal to 0, and I have it in standard form. So I'm going to have x squared minus 4x minus 45 equal to 0. Can I solve now? Yes, because I've broken it up. All my junk's on my left-hand side, and I can factor. Okay. So I am going to have to figure out what adds together to equal -4, but multiplies together to equal 45. So my multiples of 45 are 1 and 45. 2, no, 5 and 9. Are 5 and 9 promising? Yeah, because 5 minus 9 equals -4. So, and one of those has to be negative to give me -45. So I'm going to have +5 minus 9 equal to 0. All right, I divide it up and set equal to 0 and solve for x. So x is equal to -5 and x is equal to +9. My final answer is curly bracket -5, 9, curly bracket. Okay, 2 more examples. All right, solve the following quadratic equations by factoring. And this one's already different than the examples we've done previously because we have an a value. We have that 3, okay? Am I in standard form? Yes, I am. So set equal to 0, which it already is, okay? What is my next step? All right, I'm gonna have to factor. But remember when we're factoring, what's the one thing we check first? Well, we check to see if we have a greatest common factor, which we do. So I'm gonna pull that 3 out. So 3x squared plus 3x minus 4 equal to 0. My next step is to factor. So I'm going to have 3 times x equal to 0. I need to figure out what adds together to equal 3, but multiplies together to equal 4. So I already think it's going to be 1 and 4. We need one of those values to be negative to get negative 4, but we need our 3 value to be positive. So I'm going to have plus 4 minus 1. Because 4 times negative 1 gives me negative 4. 4 minus 1 gives me 3. Okay. What's my next step when solving quadratic equations by factoring? Well, it's to break apart those parentheses. Okay, but we have a 3 in front, so what's going to happen? You'll also set that equal to 0. So I would have 3 equal to 0. I would have x plus 4 equal to 0. And x minus 1 equal to 0. Well, first off, 3 does not equal 0. So we x that out and we don't even acknowledge it. It's kind of like we factor it out and we just let it fly. And I solve for the rest of my x's. So x is going to be equal to negative 4 and x is going to be equal to positive 1. So my answer is negative 4, comma 1. So if you do have that greatest common factor, you'll factor it out and then you just kind of forget about it because you're really just wanting to solve for x. All right, last example. I have 2x squared plus 3x minus 5 equal to 0. Do I have or is it in standard form, first off? Yes, it is. It's in standard form. All right. Do I have a greatest common factor? No, I do not. Okay, so think back to our properties when factoring. What do I do if I have a coefficient in front? Do y'all remember to slip and slide? Okay, so I move that coefficient down and I multiply it by my c term. So that gives me x squared plus 3x minus 10 equals 0. Do we remember this? Hopefully. Okay, now that I slip that down, I factor out. So what are my multiples of 10? 1 and 10, 5 and 2. Ooh, that's a horrible 5. 5. Oh my goodness. 5 and 2. I factor out. So I got to figure out what multiplies together to equal 10, but adds together to equal 3. Well, that's going to be 5 minus 2. So plus 5 minus 2. But remember, because we slip and slide, I have to divide both of those by 2. All right, before I go on, I got to figure out what do I do about those fractions within my parentheses. Well, the second one's easy because that one just becomes x minus 1 equal to 0. But remember, when I have this divided by 2 and it doesn't come out nice and neat, I bring that 2 right here in front of this 5. So my parentheses become 2x plus 5. Now I'm fully factored. Now I can break up my parentheses. So I have 2x plus 5 equal to 0. And I have x minus 1 equal to 0. Subtract my 5, subtract my 5. I have 2x equal to negative 5. Divide by 2, divide by 2. X is equal to negative 5 over 2. Ooh, here. Let me move that over so we can see it. And I add my 1, I have x is equal to positive 1. So my final answer for this is negative 5 over 2, comma 1. And that's all I have for you today. Okay. Today, really overarching objectives of this lesson is how do you solve quadratic equations by factoring? And we've gone through all the methods of factoring, so that information is not going away. This should just be more practice for you. If you need to go back and review those factoring properties, I strongly suggest it. That's why I had you guys make the factoring brochure, to kind of practice having a little cheat sheet for you to figure out how to solve these problems. If you guys have any questions going over this material, please let me know. I'm here to help.